Today we're looking at a video from PonderPoints, who you may remember from this video, where the argument was something like, if an exact copy of you is created, do you experience the consciousness of the copy? Therefore, souls, somehow? It'd be worth going to watch that video to familiarize yourself with what we've talked about before. But the video we're looking at now is called New Argument for Religion. So actually forget it, this must have nothing to do with what we were talking about before. It's not just going to be the same argument repackaged, but worse.
Hey everyone.
Ow! Why did you put a loud popping sound right at the start of your video?
I want to start off by saying that I do not mean to offend anybody with this video.
Okay. Do you expect your way of presenting this material to be perceived as intentionally offensive? If yes, and that bothers you, you could just do it differently. And if no, I don't know why you're saying it.
I actually want to thank you. Not everybody would click on a video like this, so I can tell that you're likely a very open-minded person. So you have my respect.
And why are you saying that now? Are you trying to flatter me into not taking offense to your apparently offensive material? What is the purpose of what you're doing? I don't get it.
Just in case people ask, let's start off with the definition.
What definition? I wish you'd started off with that so I didn't have to ask.
Think about the question, what is it like to be John?
Hey, that's not a definition.
This is asking what the subjective experience of John is like.
Are those your hands? Are you John?
So when I say you, I'm just talking about the subjective experience watching this video.
You're talking about the experience itself? You're not talking about the entity having the experience? That's kind of weird. It seems kind of grammatically confusing to use a pronoun that way.
As in you, right there.
Okay, but me right here is not an experience. Me right here is a being, having an experience. Experiences don't watch videos. Experiences are experienced. It's like if I go to the fair and the carny says, you can't go on this ride. It says you have to be 4.5 feet tall, and you're not 4.5 feet tall because all you are is the going to the fair, and experiences don't have heights. Or ride rides. Or have money. How did you get in here?
Pretty simple.
That's not at all simple the way you said it. It's an incredibly bizarre thing to say, and you're going to have to clarify it somehow. My guess is what you meant is something more like, you is defined as the subject experiencing this video. That would make a lot more sense, but that's not what you actually said. You said that what I am is the experience itself.
Now for the fun part.
Nothing about this is going to be fun.
If I revealed that right behind you,
Was that guy there the whole time?
I had just created a perfect clone of your body.
That is not what I look like. I would never wear that. This video is clearly bunk.
Then I said somebody had to die.
Then I think you were kind of a strange and perhaps not all that balanced person.
Which body would you prefer get shot?
Hold on, we're talking about clones again? This is seeming troublingly familiar so far. Anyway, I guess the answer is your body. You're some sort of mad scientist doing murderous experiments with a ceiling-mounted turret. Sorry, but it's self-defense. You gotta go. And my funny-looking short-armed clone over there can go and have some wacky 80s comedy movie shenanigans. High five, buddy.
Well, I don't know your answer, but most people have a heavy preference for the other body to be shot.
Oh, so what, are you not an option? That's convenient. Well, fair enough, if it's between just the two of us, sorry, weird-looking clone, but it's gonna have to be you. That's how self-preservation works.
That makes sense to me. I would say the same thing, because I want to experience future events.
Gotta be honest, I don't even care about the future events. I just don't want to get shot. I want to avoid that future event.
And there's clearly one scenario where I look out of the staying body, and one where I don't.
Well, it's a weird way to put it. There's one body that is you, and then there's the other body that's a copy of you, which I don't think you specified, but I think we can safely assume has its own experience of thinking and feeling that it's the continuation of the past you. You both have the same memories, the same feelings, everything, but regardless, you're two different people. Whatever bad thing happens to the other guy, you're not going to feel it, you're not going to experience it, because he's a different person.
I have a very strong preference towards one end result, because to me, this is a pretty major difference.
Yes, there's a major difference between you getting killed and somebody else getting killed. In that in the one case, it happened to one person, and in the other case, it happened to a different person.
Let me know if you agree with my preference.
Uh-huh.
Now for the actual argument. Let's look at a similar hypothetical, both slightly different contexts. There's the idea that over 7 years of consuming food, you actually become a body of all new matter. You have become the food.
That's an odd way to say it. It's more appropriate to say that matter from the food has been integrated into your body. You didn't become the food. You're not an apple now. Now, we could quibble about whether this is strictly, entirely true or not, but I don't think that's the point within the context of the argument. I think the point is more, if we assume, for the sake of argument, that this idea is true, and then we develop some scenario based on this idea. So I'm just going to treat this as completely true for the purpose of the argument.
This allows us to look at an interesting hypothetical.
I'll be the judge of that, thank you.
This time, I reveal that you're in my human factory, and we have a lot of protein bars. Our factory is going to build one single human out of these protein bars.
It's not a very efficient factory, is it? A whole factory just to build one person? Your factory is just a big empty room with a computer and a bunch of protein bars in it. Look, I don't know who started this business, but this is crazy. Outsource this thing to China. They'll be cranking out 10,000 humans a day.
But there's two possible construction methods for building our protein bar person. Regardless of which construction method we choose, it's going to be the same physical end product.
That's what we're going to be manufacturing and calling a human? Alright guys, look, I think we've got to take this back to the drawing board. Inferior products can sell if you sell them cheap, but this isn't going to move at all. There's no way we're going to make a profit off of this. We'd have to sell this thing for about half of what it cost to make it.
It's kind of like if I bought parts for a chair and had two different methods for putting the chair together. But either way, it's going to physically be the same chair. It's going to be these parts from this box in these spots.
Yes, I understand what a method is. Thank you.
In the human factory's case, it will either way be these protein bar atoms in this exact composition, in this exact location, walking away at one specific time.
Okay, that's great for you. I wish you well with your human manufacturing business, I guess. What does this have to do with me? Are you manufacturing clones of me? Do you need me to sign something?
Every physical property of the final resulting body will be the same, regardless of which construction method we choose. It won't even be different instances of carbon. It's going to be these exact protein bars used either way.
Yes, I understand. Thank you. You've mentioned that more than once now.
Then everything else currently within our science facility will be incinerated.
All right, so see, this is my problem, right? Typically, when you go into the manufacturing business, the reason you build a factory is to produce more than one copy of your product. If you just make one human and then burn down the factory, you're not really getting the full value for your money. That's some real insider pro-business knowledge for you.
And just for fun, the burned ashes could be sent into a closing black hole because Stephen Hawking believed black holes can destroy matter/information.
So in addition to building a factory to produce one unit and then burning the factory down, which already is an insane waste of money, you're going to acquire a space shuttle and retrofit it for interstellar travel to find a black hole to dump it into with the ashes of whatever was in your warehouse, your computer and your spare protein bars, I guess, for what purpose? I'm sorry, sir, but I'm afraid that based on your current business plan, we can't approve this loan.
Now, if both construction methods have really the same physical end result, you would expect people to not have a preference towards one end result over the other.
Right. If they're literally the exact same end result, then you're right. I don't have a preference for any particular end result. If these snapshots of the end state of whatever it is that you do are literally indistinguishable, then they're indistinguishable. Like your example with the chair, if you build the chair or your friend builds the chair, the photo you take of the chair at the end is going to be the same. It's just going to be whatever the chair is. Assuming either you or your friend isn't a fucking idiot who doesn't know how to put together IKEA furniture. Now, of course, it seems that the end result we're talking about in this case is just there's an identical human in either case, which is fine. You achieved that particular end result in both cases. But, you know, if I have the option, it would be nice if the method by which you achieved that result didn't involve burning down your factory and sending a space shuttle into a black hole for no reason. You could do less of a pointlessly convoluted, destructive fuck-around method. If that doesn't change the resulting human that you produce, fine. But even so, one method is clearly preferable for other reasons.
But surprisingly enough, if you agreed with the intro hypothetical, you will probably have a heavy preference towards one end result.
No. You just said the end results are exactly identical. If we're only comparing the end results, and none of what it took to get there, nothing else surrounding this, only the characteristics of the unit you produced at your factory, and the units are precisely identical in every possible way, then there are no distinctions about which to have a preference. The only way to have some kind of a preference would be to draw in other information not specifically related to the end result, such as information about the method by which you achieved the end result, that in one case you didn't burn down your factory and in one case you did, and then you could say, okay, I prefer the method where you didn't do that, but that has nothing to do with the end result. That's a preference about something else.
At least I do. Now I know what you're saying. How could that be? No way.
Correct. If you specify that the end results are exactly identical, and then you show someone only the end results, there's not going to be any preference to be had unless they're somehow fooling themselves into thinking there's a distinction that's not there. For someone to develop a preference, you would have to show them something else. And then the preference wouldn't be about the end state, because of course the end states are identical. The preference then would be about that something else that you showed them.
Why would you prefer one end result over the other if it's physically the same outcome?
You wouldn't. If all you knew about was the end result, it would make no difference to you.
Is there something besides the physical to make that preference rational?
No, if somehow you have a preference between two truly identical things, I don't think anything makes that rational. At that point, you're perceiving differences that aren't really there and making decisions based on distinctions that don't exist.
Let's look at what the two construction methods are. Method 1. You consume the protein bars for 7 years and become a body of all new matter.
Why did you turn orange? I'm not convinced these protein bars are very healthy.
You've absorbed the protein bars and become the protein bar man.
You become the orange protein bar man, and then you crash through the wall and yell, "Oh no!"
You then walk out of the science facility,
No, don't just walk out. That's not nearly as fun.
leaving everything behind to be incinerated.
Okay, so in the one case, you're a prisoner force-fed protein bars for 7 years, which isn't great, and then you walk out.
Method 2. You live off of other food for 7 years, then we take the protein bars you would have eaten and instead directly build protein bar man. We build them with the same composition, atoms, memories, location, and time that would have resulted from the first method. Then we release them, incinerating everything left behind.
Right, so in this case, they build some other guy out of food and then burn you alive. So in the one case, you get to enjoy eating food and then leave, and in the other case, you get to enjoy eating probably better food, but then get burned alive. Whether the other guy gets created or not is really beside the point. It has nothing to do with anything. I think I would rather eat protein bars for 7 years and then be free, rather than get burned alive. That's the only actual thing to have a preference about here. Now, do you notice that none of this has anything to do with the end state, which is specifically just, there's a guy outside now? If you showed someone two pictures and you said, hey, look, in this case, there's a guy outside, and in this other case, it's the exact same picture, it's the same thing. They would say, why are you asking me this? If it's identical, it's identical. On the other hand, if you show them two videos and you say, here's a video of a man who was imprisoned for 7 years and then set free, and here's a video of a man who was imprisoned for 7 years and then set on fire, they would say, yeah, the getting set free part seems better. And then you'd go off on some random tangent about how, no, but at the end, there was a guy standing outside, and he was the same guy in both cases. He had the same atoms. They'd be like, so? Why are you telling me this? What does this have to do with anything? A man burned to death. That's terrible. The preference is not about the end state of the unit produced in the factory. The preference is about what actually happened. Whether the factory managed to produce a similar unit in both cases has nothing to do with anything. Nobody cares.
Both possible humans have the same physical attributes, but something about the two possible bodies seems different.
No, you specified that nothing about the bodies is different. Therefore, nothing about the bodies is different. That's the hypothetical. Nothing should seem different because nothing is different. If you gave these two identical bodies to some scientist to examine with no further information about the circumstances, he would find them to be identical. No, what seems different and what is different is that in one case, somebody died horribly, and in the other case, nobody did. You can say that the escaped humans are perfectly identical. You can say they're perfectly different in every conceivable way. It doesn't matter. That's not what's defining our preference about whether people burn to death or not.
We once again have the same difference from the intro hypothetical. I feel like it's pretty clear that in one scenario, you look out of the final body, and in the other, you don't.
Right, because you're comparing two completely different people having two completely different experiences. In the first case, you have a person who spent 7 years eating protein bars and then walked out of a factory. In the second case, you have a person who spent 7 years eating whatever and then got burned to death. Of course, the person who got burned to death isn't looking out of the body of some other person who happened to be created. Why would he be? This person who got incinerated in the factory is completely irrelevant in this case. The question isn't about him. The question's about the other guy. The other guy, bizarrely enough, is a clone of a counterfactual. This is a new, original character, created with memories matching some alternate history what-if version of the original, where the what-if is, what if, 7 years before this factory fire, instead of proceeding to eat whatever for 7 years, this person had instead eaten protein bars for 7 years, and then, instead of being burned at the end, had walked out of the factory at the end. And then the question is the experience of this person once he walks out of the factory and then finds himself identical in configuration and location and time and everything else to this counterfactual person, identical to what the counterfactual person would have experienced or is experiencing in the alternate universe or whatever. Is it the same experience? And the answer, of course, is yes. That's what you said. Everything's exactly the same, therefore yes. And meanwhile, on a completely unrelated, irrelevant note, this universe's guy who spent his time not eating protein bars is now dead in a fire, which changes absolutely nothing. So again, you're implying that there's some sort of difference that we're supposed to perceive in the end state, in the final human standing outside the warehouse, which just isn't true. In the one case, you have 7 years of a guy eating protein bars and then leaving, and in the other case, you have a guy being created exactly as that guy would be when he was leaving, and then leaving. In the end, these are exactly the same. But then to try to toss some emotionality into it, you say, also, there's this other guy who got burned alive because. Doesn't that change the way the person is at the end? No, it has literally nothing to do with the person at the end. You could have replaced this guy with anything. A cute teddy bear, a puppy. It'd be exactly as irrelevant. Why should I think one random guy's misfortune changes the nature of the other guy who walked out of the warehouse?
To me, this is once again a pretty major difference.
You mean that spending 7 years eating protein bars and then walking out a door is a different experience from spending 7 years not eating protein bars and then dying in a fire? Yeah, I know. That's how different people having different experiences works. And you know it too, because later in the video you say and show this.
Do you not prefer one final outcome over the other?
So you know that the final outcome isn't the same, despite you continuously saying that it is. By comparing these two, all you're actually asking is, hey, if you die, do you feel the same as if you don't die? I don't know, Ponder Points, what do you think? All right, you criminal, out of your cell, you're gonna be hanged this morning. But don't you worry. This universe also contains a person who's exactly the same way you would have been if you were born 300 years later as the opposite sex in a different country with none of the same interests and who never did any of the same things. So the whole hanging thing doesn't really matter then, does it? I don't know, get walking.
I have a very heavy preference towards one final result over the other.
Yes, you have a preference for not dying versus dying. I understand. Do you have a preference for actually eating protein bars for 7 years and then walking out versus walking out thinking you ate protein bars for 7 years? You know, if you compare the guys you made up for the purpose of comparing with each other and then didn't.
Despite it being physically the same end product.
Of course, it's not actually the same physical end product, is it? You're insisting on focusing only on the guy, but that's not the entirety of the world. In scenario A, there's a guy who walks out of the building. In scenario B, there's a guy who walks out of the building, and also there's a guy burned to a crisp inside. This outcome is not the same. It's only the same if you ignore all the parts that are different and focus only on the parts that are the same.
If only the physical exists, and the resulting bodies are physically the same, you would expect everything about the final bodies to actually be and emerge the same.
It is. That's the whole point of the hypothetical. You defined it that way.
But that doesn't seem to be the case.
I don't care what it seems like to you, it is the case.
Another way to explain it is that usually, any difference between two results can be traced back to a difference stored in the final particles. If there's a difference in gravity, then, oh hey, these particles have different locations. I'm proposing a difference between the bodies that simply can't be linked to a stored difference in the final body's particles.
Yeah, and I don't really care what you propose. You defined it as there's no difference, and I agree, there's no difference. These are two people having the exact same experience with the exact same memories, in the exact same location, at the exact same time, and presumably they can't perceive the fact that the person in the warehouse was just incinerated. There's no difference. There's no need to find some silly way to wedge in a supernatural difference. If you'd compared the right scenario A person with the correct scenario B person, we wouldn't be having this problem at all. This supposed major difference that you keep saying you see just wouldn't be there. We're halfway through the video, and from the sounds of it, we're going to be talking about this total red herring for the rest of the time. And this is the kind of silly stuff that happens when you don't pay attention to your own hypotheticals.
Because even if I overlooked something, and you point to a physical difference in the end product?
No, you were pretty clear that they're identical, so that's not going to happen.
Any possible physical difference can just be removed with a change to the hypothetical.
Yeah, but the hypothetical was already there is no physical difference. It's pretty unambiguous. It's pretty hard to place spot the difference when it's defined as having no difference at all.
If the difference can't be stored in the final body physically, then it must be stored in something besides the physical.
And I don't care, since there's no difference. This is going to be a long 5 minutes, people.
We can create a simple two-premise argument, with both methods creating possible bodies of the same matter, composition, location, and time. Premise 1. With construction method 1, you look out of the final body. Premise 2. With construction method 2, you don't look out of the final body.
With construction methods 1 and 2, an identical person looks out of the identical final body. And also in construction method 2, there was some other guy there for some reason.
And we can again define you as this. since we're showing two possible things that could happen to you in the future.
Possible thing 1, you could live 7 more years and then live. Possible thing 2, you could live 7 more years and then die. Those are the things that happen to the two me's that you picked. Nothing more. Nothing about getting copied or whatever happened to the me's in either of those situations. In scenario B, that's some completely separate thing that happened. It's like saying, what happened to me in the warehouse is radically changed because a space shuttle flew into a black hole at the same time. Like, okay, what's that got to do with me? It's just some other thing with no impact.
Conclusion? There's a difference between two possible bodies that are physically the same.
They're not physically the same. The body that ate protein bars for 7 years is not physically the same as the one that didn't. The one that didn't die in a fire is not the same as the one that did. Again, you fucked up your comparison by comparing the wrong guys, and now everything you're talking about is totally pointless.
This means that physically the same, in this case, doesn't mean actually the same.
It doesn't mean anything, because you forgot what the thing was about. 4 more minutes.
This implies that there's a non-physical element to humans.
To be honest, I'm starting to wonder if I should even bother going through the last 4 minutes. It'll probably just be me pointing the same thing out over and over until the end. I'll give it a little while longer. We'll see if there's anything else interesting that comes up, and if it doesn't for long enough, then I'll just cut it.
Essentially, this is an argument for there being more than the physical.
Yeah, well, you better start looking for a different one.
Where else could the difference be stored in the final body?
There's no difference between scenario A guy and the clone of scenario A guy at the end. Already said that.
Once again, it can't be stored physically. Any physical difference between the final bodies can just be removed. I also have a page here just to address some common objections, so feel free to pause the video.
Alright, we'll go through this and then I'm really starting to think I might just end this, but we'll see. But we don't have the technology to do that. Yeah, I don't care. What if the 7-year statistic isn't 100% true? Don't care. How did they get it to be an exact clone? Don't care. What if black holes don't destroy information? Now here's something interesting. Why this thing about dumping the original you in a black hole? What does that change? I don't understand why that's even there. Even if you hadn't screwed up the argument so bad, I still don't understand what this is supposed to change. It's just kind of tacked on to get a little extra sci-fi-ness, I guess. Okay, I said that was interesting. I guess that was an overstatement. It was more interesting than just repeating myself. But moving on, I guess. I don't think we're going to be here much longer.
Anyways, for some context, they don't teach you this, but we actually don't have a physical explanation for just the existence of subjective experience.
Okay, now we're irrelevantly wandering into the hard problem of consciousness. I'm done. This is so completely irrelevant to the argument that there's no reason to even start down this road. And I looked ahead, and for the most part, I don't have much else to say to anything that's much different from what I've already said, so that'll be that, I guess. Thank you everybody for watching. Before you go, if you would be so kind, please do give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't, and if you like the channel, maybe consider supporting. A couple of bucks per video or per month helps a huge amount, and enormous thanks to all of my supporters who've already made that choice. Early access, email list, list.logicked.com, and I'll see you next time.